Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On between Fred, my brother, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Vince. I'm always good when I got a cold beer in my hand. You to my left. How could I get any better than that?
Right. So Jason couldn't make it tonight. So Fred, let's talk about our guest.
All right. Well, if you have not seen our guest tonight, Nina DiGregorio, or her band Femmes of Rock on YouTube or live in concert, you are missing a truly unique musical experience as they blend classic rock and roll with the twist of electric violins and cellos, fueled by amazing showmanship. Her version of Eddie Van Halen's Eruption is setting YouTube on fire. And to think she wanted to be a neurosurgeon. Well, the medical field's loss is the music field's gain. So please welcome to Creativity Talking, Nina I knew I was going to mess that up. Nina DiGregorio.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Nina.
Just bring Nina. I knew I was going to screw that up.
Italian card in, Fred.
Oh my God. I'm the worst when it comes to name. Hello, Nina.
No more sauce and meatballs for you. You're done.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. Okay, so I had my cousin's son played the violin, and he was a punk rocker, and he was a bass player. And this is years and years and years ago. And I was like, you should plug in your violin, dude. Like, you will freak people out. And now it's great to see that people like you are out there, electric violin, just tearing it up because it's so perfectly suited.
It really works well in rock, metal, punk, all sorts of genres like that. And it's just that people aren't used to hearing it in that way yet.
Right, and they should be. And hopefully they should go listen to the many covers that you do online, as well as a fantastic cover, Eruption tribute to Eddie Van Halen. Now, are all your violins fretted, or do you have to have that one specially made?
Nope, you can kind of see behind me here. A few of my violins are hanging on the wall back there. There's some regular classical acoustic violins. There's let's see if I can get my finger over it. That one's a Viper. That's fretted 6-string. This is a electric fretless 5-string. My other Viper is over here. But the 6 and 7 strings are fretted. They help me do specific guitar techniques with the frets. And then the 4 and 5 strings are fretless that I have. And they serve different purposes.
And how long did you start playing when you were a little kid?
I started classical violin at 9 years old, and I studied classical violin through a master's degree in college. So I was playing in symphony orchestra and learning classical repertoire right up till that time. And my interests always were towards rock guitar players, though. And as soon as the technology kind of, became more available to use electric violins, and then when I found out they had 6 and 7 string violins that would allow me to use the entire range of the guitar, and then fretted violins, which enable me to do finger tapping and power chords and pinch harmonics a little bit easier. Well, you can't do the tapping at all on a fretless, I don't think, in the traditional sense of it. But, I was really just kind of driven in that direction to play rock music, which is what I grew up loving.
No, I not even know they had a 6 and 7 string.
My 6 and 7 string were made by Mark Wood, who is a really famous rock violinist. He was one of the kind of founding members of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and he invented that flying V violin where your head doesn't have to be with a chin rest, and they're up to 7 strings. Yeah, that violin right there. So he invented that violin, and it's really helped me to do a lot of guitar things on violin.
That's unbelievable. We just had Joel Holkstra on.
And, yeah.
And we were talking, and it's like, there's that whole discussion. Oh, well, I have my band and I want to play originals. Well, do you want to play out anywhere? If you're just starting, if you're just starting a band, no one knows. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if you can play covers and you got gigs.
Right. That's the thing. I mean, I think that everybody starts out playing covers. Most of your favorite rock bands that you love, their music, I'm sure, started out playing covers. The only difference is they were playing covers at backyard weddings and high school dances and shopping malls, and then they got discovered. And we're playing our covers on social media to
Right.
gain our fans before we release our original stuff. It would make no sense for me to release an original album if I had like 48 followers on social media.
Right.
So you build your audience and then you give them your original stuff. And it's really no different than it was before. It's just
Right.
instead of playing the school dances, you're playing on social media. So
And it's always there.
it's always
Right.
there. That's right. And
Yeah.
I mean, I have experience live too, because that's important. You know,
Yeah.
I've done
Oh, yeah.
thousands of shows live with other artists and with my own show. You know, some people who don't have the experience with both, it's hard to transition. So a good combination of playing live out in public and also keeping up with your social media, it's the only way to do it in today's music world.
Yeah, and it's been an ongoing
Right.
discussion here about, like, a lot of my hardcore musician buddies are like, I only want to play well, do you want to be a working musician or do you want to play in your basement for your three buddies? And why is it like, maybe we should stop calling them covers and go to standards again?
Yeah, I think that it's really strange for me who grew up in the classical music world, right? For the first 23 years of my life, I played classical music
Right.
always for hours every single day. And the best musicians in the world,
Yeah.
touring virtuoso classical players, are
Right.
playing music by Tchaikovsky and music by Paganini. And, like they're playing we're not talking decades old cover songs. We're
Right,
talking
right.
centuries old cover songs. And why do they do that? Why do they keep playing the same repertoire? One, because it makes you a better player to learn that repertoire. And
Yeah.
two, it's sacred, beloved repertoire in the genre that it would be a shame if no one ever heard Beethoven's Ninth Symphony performed ever again with such a glorious piece of music that it is. To me, the guitar greats, the music that I cover, it'd be a shame if the music died with the artist. Like, why shouldn't we continue playing that music for the same reason I studied classical music? One, it makes me a better player to learn that stuff.
Sure.
And two, you need to keep this sacred repertoire alive.
Right.
So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, because we were talking about, we brought up Foreigner. Now there's no original members, but I'm like, yeah, but does it matter? It doesn't matter.
Well, sometimes
they're going to hear the songs that they love. They don't necessarily know who the lineup is.
Right. And sometimes some of the non-original members have been there longer than the original members even were. That happens sometimes.
That's he's been there for like 30 years plus, so he's more than, capable. And Pilsen, of course.
And I have nothing wrong with even high-end cover bands that are really great musicians that I would never in my lifetime have had the chance to see Led Zeppelin's music performed live and performed well without the existence of tribute or cover acts, because I wasn't around then. So what a shame that would have been if I could never experience the music of Led Zeppelin live. Like, and who are these people to tell you that it's like less than anything else? So
it's all relative, because no one ever calls the London Symphony Orchestra a cover band.
That's what I give people on my social media when they're like, "Oh, you're nothing because you're just a cover artist." I'm like, "Oh, do you troll the New York Philharmonic's page and call them a stupid cover band too?"
That is so
Come on.
So, Nina, we'll backtrack just a little bit to your beginning. You were born in Lewiston, New York.
That's right.
And I know you're classically trained, and I understand you wanted to be a saxophonist, but somebody by the name of Jimi Hendrix kind of turned you in the other direction, right?
Yes, the first cover that I attempted to do on electric violin was the Star Spangled Banner. I had seen my dad watching a documentary on Woodstock, and when I heard it, I came in from the other room and I was like, "What is this? This is the coolest person I've ever seen in my life." And so at that point, I had tried everything I could to like stick the violin near an amp and get feedback and like get a wah-wah pedal and mess with distortions and overdrives and things like that. And that was it's funny that I can remember the exact moment where I decided I was going to learn guitar solos on the violin, and that was the first one.
Nice. So were you like totally stoked to like show your dad, listen what I...
Oh yeah, they came home from work one day and I was like, "Look what I can do." And they're like, "Oh boy, you're not going to be a doctor anymore, are you?"
No.
So much for the lake house, honey.
These hands are going to do something else.
Yeah. So you did. You did pre-med?
I studied pre-med tracking courses in college. I also graduated with an English degree and with a music degree. There were a lot of things I maybe wanted to do with the English degree. I was thinking maybe creative writing. Maybe I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. Anyone who follows my social media knows that I'm the biggest Buffalo Bills fan on the face of the earth, probably. So at one point I thought maybe I could be a sportscaster or something like that. But then the music stuff was kind of fate. Like good things kept happening that led to another, that led to another. And before I knew it, that was my career.
Yeah, I wanted to be a sportscaster too, but then I was told I have the face for radio, so I had to choose another field. So, and then you moved to Vegas, right?
Yes.
Going to college in Vegas, and you were part of Wayne Newton's orchestra while you were in college in Vegas?
Yes, right near the end of my college career, I was offered a job to play in Wayne Newton's orchestra. And so that was my first professional job. I mean, I guess you could say that I didn't have to go through all the hard knocks, like in the sleeping in like, vans and things like that, because my first gig was a pretty good gig. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm not going to lie. I got pretty lucky with that. But, I did the Wayne Newton show. I played with Toni Braxton after that in her band. I did a few shows with David Foster in his band after that. And when I did end up playing in a lounge band and playing the lounges in Vegas, till 2, 3 in the morning every night, it was by choice at that point. It was because I kind of wanted something that was like low stress and fun for a while. I'd spent my whole life being this serious classical musician up to getting a master's degree, and I just wanted to have fun. And believe me, there's no better place to do that than Las Vegas. So
yeah,
especially
for
past
sure.
midnight.
So
now which violin is this? The one of the V's?
Yes, that's the 6-string fretted Viper violin. And I was using that violin pretty regularly in our show. The range worked for most of the solos, except now I use a 7-string in the show because I've added eruption and I need that 7th string to hit some notes in eruption.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So when you started then going on from Wayne, I mean, that's a really good first line to have on your resume, is that you were in Wayne Newton's orchestra. Anyone who knows anything about music is going to know that's top notch.
Yeah, and I knew of him from the National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation movie. So I was like, oh, it's the guy from the movie. Yeah, okay, that's awesome. But, I learned a lot being in that show because he's like one of the last Vegas icons, like from the old school of entertainment. And he's such a good front person. I watched him talk to the crowd and how to carry a crowd for 90 minutes or 2 hours. And he was a really good front person. And also the other thing that I got a lot of experience in his show, he had paper charts, that probably the best orchestrators in the world wrote out for his orchestra decades ago. And the amount of songs he had was like this. And sometimes he'd call a song during the show that wasn't in the set list. And he'd be like, oh, pull out this one. And we had it all alphabetized. So we'd quickly dig through and we'd find it. We'd put it up. Then he'd be like, oh, I want to sing that in D flat tonight. And then we're looking at music that's maybe written in like, E, and we're in our heads. They're like, oh yeah, well, this is a skill that you have to have. If you want to play these old school jazz band type gigs like this, you got to transpose on the spot. So I had to do that sometimes where I would transpose reading music in my head in real time. And those are skills that I always say, every show I played in, I learned something from. And from his show, like I said, I really took something about how to be a good front person and about how to have those old school transposition and sight reading skills.
And also,
did he give you any freedom as far as your musical, or did you have pretty much stay scripted to everything, or could you like maybe get out there and do a little tweaking, a little soloing or anything?
So in his show, I wasn't a soloist. I was part of a small string section. So it was pretty much like me and maybe 4 other violinists and a couple cellists, and it was like a chamber string orchestra. So we were pretty much sticking to the music and playing our parts that were on the page. But every now and then he'd bring me into one of the comedy jokes or something like that, and throw it back and forth on stage for a second. But yeah, that was kind of a backing orchestra gig. When I played with Tony Braxton, I was a soloist in that show, though.
Right, and getting that Wayne Newton. I mean, when you start out, you're usually in gigs where you have no protection, and you have the largest looming protection in Vegas because everyone loves Wayne Newton.
Yeah, I mean, it was really overwhelming. I remember, my very first gig and being in the green room and then walking out on the stage for the first time and being like, Elvis stood on this stage where I'm at. This is my first job. I'm 20 nothing. And I'm playing on a stage that Elvis played on, that Frank Sinatra played on. It was really something at that age to be able to have those experiences. And even though I don't really do the backing musician gigs anymore because my show is so busy, I always look back with fond memories on my times playing with other artists and the things that I learned with them.
I mean, just to play with someone who's so revered, like if you're around for that long, there's usually a reason why beyond your music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
you're a rough
that is
you're not gonna.
That is great. I mean, Joel, when we had Joel Hoekstra on last week, he played for Cher for a couple of years. So
yeah,
everybody, you have to do that, and it's nothing wrong with it. It's just it gets you your feet wet. It gets you. So after Wayne, and then you moved on to Tony Braxton. How soon after that then did the Femmes of Rock come about, and how did you originate that, and how did that call come about? How was that born?
Well, it was kind of born when I was still a kid, around the time of the Jimi Hendrix stuff in the Buffalo area. When I was 12, 13 years old, I started writing string quartet arrangements of my favorite rock songs. So I would take Led Zeppelin Kashmir, or I would take The Who, Baba O'Reilly, or I would take Pink Floyd, Comfortably Numb, and I would write an arrangement for a string quartet. And at the time, we were acoustic strings. Like, we couldn't afford all the gear to have an electric group. But we got gigs in the Buffalo area. We'd play weddings, wedding receptions, cocktail hours. We'd play on the patio at restaurants in Buffalo in the summer. And these people got such a kick out of watching a bunch of teenagers play Led Zeppelin on classical string instruments. And watching their reaction to this, I was like, I think we're onto something here. And so I continued to develop that skill of arranging. And when I got to Las Vegas and I started to have a job and I started making more money and I made connections and I got a Yamaha endorsement, I was able to get instruments for the quartet. And then we became electric at that point. And we had backing tracks created, and we were called Bella Electric Strings. And it was a corporate act. And we did a ton of corporate work in Vegas, made a lot of money doing it. And then one day someone was at one of these corporate events, and they were like, we have a theater, and have you ever sold tickets to this? It's really amazing. And of course I said yes, even though we'd never done a ticketed show. And I didn't really have a show that was geared towards a production show. And then I had about a year before the show happened, and I wrote these specialized arrangements with the medleys. We added singing to the show. We synced up video content. We made it a real production show. But again, like everything else that's happened to me, it was kind of just by fate that we created this production show version of the Bella Strings, which is called the Femmes of Rock show. And we continue to tour it to this day. So that was all kind of going on peripherally while I was playing with Tony Braxton, while I was playing with David Foster. It was always kind of there. It just wasn't my main thing yet at that time.
Yeah. But you're consistently building your brand.
It's necessary.
Absolutely. And and you're pretty, with all the social media and YouTube stuff that you do. So how do you manage your time? Because, you've got a family, and then you tour, and then you've got multiple things happening. How do you best deal with your time schedules?
Well, it's a constant feeling of never having enough hours in the day. That's for sure. My daughter is 4 years old and just started pre-K this year. So the house got awfully quiet during the day. But I'm finding that I can get more things done, but at the same time, I miss her little noises in the house all day long. So, when the kids are at school, that's the best time to get things done. I find that Monday and Tuesday, most of my corporate people are working. So I do all of my business stuff, where I have to answer emails in advance, corporate events and contracts and things like that. I do that stuff at the beginning of the week during the day when all the corporate people are working. And then later in the week, I'll do my studio stuff where I work on learning things, recording things, filming my videos, everything like that. And the social media, unfortunately, it's like, whenever you got a free 5 minutes, whether you're, like sitting down, waiting for something, waiting for the water to boil on the stove, or, you're just, whenever you can get your promo stuff posted, it takes time. Like, especially if you've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of the different things. So even to post one video on all of the different platforms, that's like an hour out of your day. And so to make consistent posts on every platform to promote all of the shows and all of the videos, it's a full-time job in itself. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you need to take your social media that seriously, and you need to post regularly, or you'll fall off the algorithm and then they won't show your stuff to anybody anymore.
Yeah, it's a constant battle. And, like, oh, hey, have you tried? I'm like, man, I'm maxed out on like the social media amount of between YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and that. There's a lot of things to do. I mean, plus on top of you got a tour and everything else, and you got dealing with the family and
Yep, it's constant.
It's a perfectly planned execution on your part, put it that way.
There's no downtime.
Right.
Yeah, and so during the pandemic, I know you put out a lot of videos. You did a Rush tribute video, like a Zoom video with all the other musicians.
Yes.
And it's an amazing tribute to Rush. You even covered 2112. But I know in the video they purposely focused that you were pregnant at the time. So how soon after that was your daughter is that your daughter?
That was my daughter.
Was she born?
Yeah, I was probably maybe 8 months pregnant when we did that. So it was very shortly after that video that my daughter was born. But she's in the video. My son actually is too. At the very end of that video on YouTube, there's a little boy wearing these futuristic sunglasses, attention all planets, from the Solar Federation, doing that thing. And that's my son doing that, actually. So we have like a great series of like 20 minutes of outtakes of him trying to get the words right for that part.
Yeah.
Save that for his 18th birthday.
Yeah.
Play. And I mentioned in the introduction some of the songs that you've done on YouTube. And the list is amazing. Eruption, as I mentioned, which if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. It'll blow you away. And hopefully you do that live with the Femmes, right?
Yes, we do that in our show.
All right. You did Stairway to Heaven, Beat It, 25 or 6 to 4, which is an amazing solo you did in honor of Terry Kath. Comfortably Numb, which that song is made for violin. That song, you nailed that one. Crazy Train, More Than a Feeling. You did Kashmir. The one I wanted to ask you about is you did Do You Feel Like I Do by Peter Frampton, complete with the talk box, which is so cool. But I understand you had a little bit of criticism from the social media out there from some trolls, and Peter Frampton came to your defense. How cool was that?
Well, he actually, there was a lot of people saying, oh, Peter Frampton would hate this. They say things like, because people are just stupid.
Oh,
they're just, it's mostly just jealous boomers. Like that's what it is. Unfortunately, that's the majority of the trolls. But so Frampton ended up like sharing it on his page, both on his Twitter, whatever it's called now, and on his Facebook page. And he gave me a really nice compliment and shared my video. So at that point I was able to be like, well, if it's good enough for the guy who did it, then I don't care what you think. So
exactly. Yeah, with trolls, people ask me, how do you deal with trolls? I think they're funny. The first few that we had, I was like going back at them, like, if you're going to try to out funny me, good luck. Try whatever. But then, just started blowing them off. My co-host Jason, who's not here today, he recorded like I'll Always Love You by Whitney Houston, Black Sabbath Live. I worked at Guns N' Roses and Rolling Stones and Janet Jackson. And there's this guy, from his parents' basement calling us just the So we actually use it now when we don't have a guest on the show. Washed up genius.
Washed up geniuses.
So I embraced and trolled them, you know.
Oh, I
Yes.
think a lot of the people who follow my page, they don't follow me because of the music. They follow me because of my responses to the trolls. I have posts on my Instagram where I show all the photos of the things I've said to them. And, you know, I say the things that people always think of saying, but they don't necessarily say out loud. But that's the Buffalo Italian in me. You know?
Jason,
Yeah.
Jason's from Roscoe, New York. And so he's up in the, he was from the Catskills up there. And
Oh, yeah.
but he's like, oh man, I'm like, don't worry about it. I said, just the viewers will take care of them. And the viewers, they're worse than we are. They just like go out like we don't have to do anything. But
Oh, yeah.
you know, some people's days are just filled with going out and trying to create, you know, chaos, I guess.
Yeah, the thing is, like, for me, because the videos are you pretty consistently reaching a lot of people that I don't know or that have never seen my show. It's always like the same kind of person, which is strange. Like I can predict exactly what this person is going to be all about on their Facebook page because they're all the same type of person, ironically.
Right.
And so it's like, oh yeah, another one of you. I get it. Okay. You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, like in this world, we now have a new class of people. I call them the articleists. Like, oh, you read an article. Or
yeah, the ones on
then
my
they become
page,
dangerous.
they really just I've got like a lot of woman haters on my page. It doesn't matter that most of my videos I'm wearing t-shirts and jeans. They'll still say things like, oh, it's the only reason people watch your videos is for sex appeal or this or that. It doesn't matter like that I have a master's degree in violin, like the hardest instrument you can play. None of that matters to them.
Right.
They just hate women. Like, did you say that to David Lee Roth when he wore his assless chaps? You know?
Right.
No. So
Yeah, you do. You do dress very casual in your videos. It's not like you're parading around out there.
I mean, on stage, you dress for the stage, right?
Yeah,
You're
absolutely
playing Led Zeppelin music with lights and this and that. You dress like a rock star. But when I'm at home here in my studio, I'm wearing t-shirts and jeans, and that's what I wear in my videos from home. And people still give me a hard time. If you don't wear any makeup, they give you a hard time for that. If you wear makeup, they give you a hard time for that too. So I can't escape it. It's every single day. At least 10 people are sexually harassing me on social media. But like I said, I usually lay them to waste with my replies, and then my fans pile on and they do the rest. So
yeah, you're messing with the Italian girl. Good luck.
Barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, lay the groundwork and let your fans finish it up. So I got to tell you, Nina, years ago, I had seen a Black Sabbath cover band, local cover band. About halfway through their set, they had a young Asian girl get up there with a violin, join them for 3 songs. And she nailed it, doing 3 Sabbath songs, going away. And I just realized how violin can add so much. And you've proven that, obviously, with all your videos. But it was amazing to see her do some Sabbath.
Yeah, that's awesome. I probably know her. We're a really small community.
Maybe you do, yeah.
In this, we do a search for new music. So Monday, it's Monday metal. Tuesday is blues day. Then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's guitar-based or string-based music. And then we interview people on the Saturday show that we react to. And I have to say right now, the way it stands, the girls are whooping the guy's ass internationally. There's so much good music coming out right now, and happy, uplifting music, not dour like we've 20 years or so.
Here's one of them right here, Nita Strauss.
Oh yeah, of course.
Saw her not that long ago. She's amazing. I just saw Orianthi last week.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, they're both
I know
awesome.
I was gonna mess that. She's amazing. I mean, they just shred. So
and for the first time last year, more electric guitars were bought by women than men.
That's interesting.
Guitar-based
music is up 59% sales-wise, and guitar sales are up 57%.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's good for rock.
And so speaking of guitars, on Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin, of course you do the violin, but you also break out the guitar and the bass in that video.
That's
How
right.
often do you pull out the guitar, especially on stage or live?
I'm definitely better at bass guitar than I am at regular guitar because I actually played in a band as a bass player where I had to play every night and learn songs and things like that. So whenever I get the chance to, I love learning things on bass. I especially love learning Rush songs on bass for obvious reasons. So anytime, my husband will be like, "Oh, let's cover this Rush song." Okay. I get to do something really fun, which is learn something interesting on bass guitar. For me, it's like a novelty because I'm not really a bass player, but to be able to learn it, it's very, very fun for me. The guitar, I started to self-teach myself guitar about 13 years old, like chords from fake books and picking out solos probably the wrong way. I never took lessons on guitar or anything, but I could play well enough to like get through some parts on my backing tracks for my violin solos. Or, if I had to play like a backup rhythm guitar type situation, and I could get through that. I'm not going to go out there and be shredding Crazy Train on the guitar without a few lessons and some practicing. But, the violin is definitely my main instrument.
Now, have you had any of your violins custom made for you?
Yes. The black 7-string Viper that I play in the Eruption video, that was custom made for me by Wood Violins.
And how long does something like that take?
It took probably a bit over a year for that to happen. And that was fast because I think sometimes it could take up to like 2 years or more to have one custom made.
Yeah. Now, they never figured out what made the Stradivarius, did they? Like, there's some mystery somewhere.
There's a lot of things, and it's, like, why is old wine or old whiskey sometimes better? There were trees back in Italy back in the day that are even extinct. So certain types of wood that you can't access anymore that were used on some of these instruments. It's the exact precision and the way that the wood has aged, and just the violin, I always say it's kind of like golf, like every 100th of a millimeter matters for it to be really good. It's just one of those things that has to be super precise. And you can tell the difference, between a really good violin and a really cheap violin with a lot of things, with its playability, with the ease of playability, with the tone quality, but also just how well the instrument stays in tune and whether it intonates with itself well. Like, is your third finger note on this string in the same spot as the third finger note on this string? And are they in tune with each other? On a cheap violin, you're going to lack a lot of that. So it's going to be harder to play in tune on a cheap instrument.
Nice. It's interesting you mentioned about the trees that are no longer in existence. And, one of the things that made this country, our country, is war. They started making all the steel weapons over here because they chopped down all the trees to use it for fuel to make swords and everything in Europe. And I mean, it's just think about that. All the trees are gone because of swords. Like, that's weird.
Humans have done some weird things.
Oh my, yeah, totally, absolutely.
We are the worst.
Yeah. We suck. Humans suck.
We do. Yeah. We do.
Yeah.
And I ask you, Nina, being classically trained, how do you address the old adage that a lot of classical musicians say about classically trained musicians like yourself, that they went into rock because it's easier? How do you address that?
So I've been asked this question in the past. Sometimes people are like, well, what's harder, classical or rock? And I say, well, it depends on what type of hard you're talking about. There are, and if you say that either one is easier than the other, you're stupid and you have no experience with both of them, pretty much. So with classical music, the notes themselves, the repertoire is harder. There's nothing that you're going to play in the rock repertoire note-wise that's going to be more complicated than Paganini or the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. So the notes in the repertoire are definitely harder. The amount of time that you have to practice to play that repertoire perfectly every single time in tune with the correct bow technique, it's way more hours and way more work and way more difficult. The thing that's people think, well, then if you have such an easy job playing easy notes in rock music, it must just be a lot easier. And I always tell people, well, here's the thing. If you translate a guitar solo like to a violin and you just play it like a violin, you play it in the violin octave with the violin notes, you're taking parts up an octave or doing this, you're playing slurs. That's not that difficult. But if you want to take a guitar solo and play it on a violin and sound like the original guitar player, now you're getting into a whole bunch of different skills that are much more difficult than you think they are. For instance, I had to teach myself over the course of months how to finger tap on a violin to play Eruption. Not something that you see every day on a violin. So I had to experiment with gear and experiment with different tones and different effects chains and things like that. And I'm still experimenting with it to try and get it right live with the correct sound. Creating tones on whatever, whether you use analog stop boxes, whether you use digital boards, creating your sounds and making them not sound like shit, like bees buzzing electric violin style. That is a skill all in itself, because I could just plug into a Metal Zone pedal and play something. And like, some people will be like, oh, cool. And then everyone else is going to be like, that's the worst tone I've ever heard in my life. I don't want any of my stuff to sound like that. So being able to do that is a skill. Being able to take guitar techniques and do the same thing on violin. Like when I bend strings, I'll bend them sideways like a guitar player will, and a regular violinist will just slide up to the note. But to me, it sounds different. It sounds more authentic to bend the way a guitar player would, but it's not done in violin music. People don't do that. So learning how to do things like pinch harmonics, learning how to utilize pedals like the whammy DT that I have to sound like someone, with the Floyd Rose system on their guitar. All of these things are not something that a classical violinist will just pick up and immediately be able to do. It's a completely different skill. It's apples and oranges. So that's my answer to which one is easier. And for the classical people that say that rock is easy, well, they haven't tried to do it at a high level where they actually sound good and not like a violin, and I don't think rock people are ever saying that classical music isn't hard. Like they know that it's hard. So it's usually the classical people looking down on the rock people.
Oh, you're playing 3 chords tonight.
Yeah, but I'm playing them to 2,000 people. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when you did Eruption, first of all, my two-part question. My first question is, did you do Eruption in one take?
So there's a couple versions of it. There's like a live version. So obviously the live version was completely one take, but it took me a while to figure out how to switch sounds between the tapping sound that I created in the regular part. So I believe the tapping section was a separate sound, and I hadn't figured out like the logistics of how to get my feet and the pedals going in the right way. And I've thought about this. So like, what is the smoothest way to transition between these sounds? And I finally got it where it's a very smooth transition, but that was very early on when I recorded it, the whole thing. So, it was a process to get it down for sure.
Yeah. I saw the interview you did with, I forgot what the gentleman's name was, but it was the day before you went in the studio to record it.
That's
and you
right.
said, I'm going to have myself either 1 or 12 beers. So did you get your 12 beers after that?
Oh, yes. Definitely had a few beers when that day was done for sure. That was a long time coming. And like I said, just filming the video wasn't the end of it, because getting something to sound good in a controlled environment like a studio is completely different than getting it to sound good on a giant PA system at a hockey arena or at a performing arts center or something like that. So I've played it live in concert, for all of our dates after that. And maybe like a third of them, I've had problems with my pedal chain live, because you're at completely different gain structures. There's noise, there's things like that.
Right.
And so it wasn't perfect sounding. And then I go back to the drawing board. I'm like, okay, what's causing this noise and how do I fix it? And then I fix it at home in the studio. And then you get to another live venue with a different PA system and different cables and different everything. And there's another issue with it, because the violin wasn't meant to do something like this. So I'm using a lot of artificial means to be able to get these sounds out of the instrument. So now I've gotten to the point where our next show is the 14th and 15th of September in Chicago. And at the Arcada and the Des Plaines Theater. And I've now gotten my rig to the point where I'm like, okay, there's no noise. I'm ready to do it again. So hopefully when we get to Chicago and we plug into the rig at the Arcada on September 14th, there will still be no noise and it will be perfect sounding. But this is something that sometimes the audience doesn't know that, but you're like, what was that? That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like the studio, So it's a ever evolving process to get your tones perfect.
And just so you know, on the 14th in St. Charles, Illinois at the Arcada, I will be in the front row center stage. So you're going to have to look at this for an hour and a half, staring up at you. But I'll be there front row. So I'm looking so forward to it.
Well, Ron Onesti values his Italian heritage as well. So I might have to call you out to him there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know Ron well. He's a good man. And so you're getting both venues. You know what? I heard you made a comment that I absolutely love. You said, I won't record anything that can't be duplicated live. I love that. To put everything on record, you can put, you don't need anything mechanical live. And I think that's fantastic.
I've done a lot of things to back up that statement. When I first recorded Comfortably Numb, there was one note that I couldn't hit on the 5-string violin. And I was like, I don't want to utilize a studio trick to do this live in my show. So I went and I bought a 6-string violin so that I could duplicate every note from Comfortably Numb live on stage with the band. Then at the point where it came down to Eruption, I went out and bought a 7-string fretted violin so that I could duplicate everything that I was going to do in the studio live. And I don't even want to tell you how much money I've spent on pedals, both digital and analog, things that I've bought, things that I've sent back so that I could duplicate the sounds from the studio live on stage. And it probably by far, by months and months, I've spent the most time trying to duplicate the live sound of Eruption like the studio sound.
You mentioned Comfortably Numb. So I was a tour consultant for Pink Floyd. Not the nicest group of individuals, I'll leave it at that. But that song used to drive me crazy. And then my dad died and from Alzheimer's. And that song means so much to me now. Like literally overnight, I was like, oh. Like it's amazing how something can hit you so differently. Even, that I knew that song for 25, 30 years before that happened to my dad. And that day, the song changed.
It's true. Your experiences can sometimes change your viewpoint about everyday experiences, even music, things like that. I lost my grandfather to Alzheimer's, so I understand the whole process of it from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And I think with David Gilmour, his solos have a special, emotion to them that translates well to violin. And I think that's probably what drew me to him as one of the first guitar players that I was trying to cover in the early days. And, being able to capture emotion, like it's not all about being a shredder. You don't have to just be a shredder to be a good guitar player. And I think the different guitar players that I cover, they all have such diverse styles. And again, every time I cover someone, if I cover David Gilmour, if I cover Jimmy Page, if I cover Eddie Van Halen, I'm learning something different each time I study their repertoire. And so I like to do that. I like to mix it up a bit.
With Van
Speaking of all those great guitarists you just talked about, was there a song, if any, that presented more of a challenge than any other?
Eruption, for sure, because finger tapping didn't exist on a violin. It was, you couldn't just go to YouTube and be like, how do you do this? I could pick up a guitar right now and I could do the finger tapping on Eruption and you'll hear it. Even if I don't plug the guitar in, it'll make some sound. And you can go watch a tutorial by 1,000 different people on how to play Eruption on a guitar on YouTube right now. Go try and find that for violin. It was like being in an abyss of nothing that you have to do it all from scratch by yourself. So for sure, above and beyond, that was the hardest that I had to learn. And prior to that, the hardest thing I probably did was Beat It, because I was also trying to sound like Eddie Van Halen. So pretty much anything I have to sound like Eddie has been the hardest.
Now, I always thought it was really interesting about Van Halen because people are like, why does Van Halen stand out so differently or dramatically than the rest of the bands of the same time, everyone was into blues, or they discovered the blues through England and then brought it back. But Van Halen and Dave, they were brought up on big band and jazz.
Right.
So there's a whole different
That's right.
already. There's a whole different feeling of, you know, I just think that's what made them stand out, was they had the jazz influence.
The thing that always struck me about Eddie is probably not the same thing that strikes everyone else about his playing. And I was a late comer to Van Halen because the 80s music was not of my era. I was like a 90s kid,
Yeah.
you know, millennial. So it was just a little bit before the era of music that I remember. And when my husband was playing a lot of Van Halen, and I started to really listen more so that I could learn his stuff. And when I started studying his stuff, the thing that struck me the most was his impeccable sense of rhythm
Yes.
guitar in his songs. And I'm like, this guy is holding it down with these insane, really fast, like swinging riffs. Incredible. And to me, that's one of the most impressive things after studying some of his playing, is his sense of rhythm like that. It's not all the fancy stuff. It's
Right.
that, I think.
It's funny you're bringing that up, because I used to talk, you know, when we'd watch Eddie, you know, like my buddies are trying to recreate. I'm like, why are you watching his left hand?
Yeah,
It's the other one.
Yeah.
And just how fast he could sweep, and the way that he held his metal pick was just really interesting. But I'm a huge fan.
Rhythm is the underrated, you know, hero of musicianship, I think.
Oh yeah.
People are worried about notes so much, but the rhythm part, if you can really fall in with that, that makes you a great musician.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people are like, oh, can you play leads? Nah, not really, but I'm a kick-ass rhythm player. Are you?
Yeah.
And you know,
I
like,
think that's
people out, Dave Mustaine, fantastic. You know, there's certain guys that are, you know.
and Angus's brother in AC/DC, phenomenal.
Oh, Malcolm,
I mean,
yeah.
Phenomenal rhythm player and you have to with Malcolm all over this, or with Angus all over the stage. You have to have that rhythm going.
And
Yeah,
anyone in a band where there's only one guitar, I'm fascinated by power trios or quartets, or where there's only one
Yeah.
guitar player in the band and the guy sounds huge. Like if you have a power trio and it sounds like there's 7 people on the stage, you have
Yeah.
3 immensely talented people, you know, like Rush.
Right.
Yeah, that's the
Yes.
one thing also from finding new music I've noticed. Like when we first started doing it, after like 4 months, we're like, wait a minute, every person that, because I'll only listen to 3 seconds so we can give a fresh reaction. I'm not going to listen to it. They're all power trios. And we're like, whoa, that's really cool. And the bass is coming to the forefront because it used to be lost in the mix for a while. There's all these incredible bass players out there. There's this one power trio out of Japan. They're on their 23rd album, Ninjin Aisu. They had this 10-minute heavy metal song, and it was like 6 different songs in there. I'm like, how come I've never heard of it? You know, what 3 people can do. They either fill in all the spaces or they don't, because you don't need to fill in every space. You can let it breathe a little, but it's amazing.
Right.
You know, a 3-piece versus a 5-piece. If you had a chance to see which band, I'm going to go see the 3-piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, because there's just got, you know, so much more happening there. Okay,
Now,
go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to ask real quick about the members of the band. I know on the website you have everybody's bio. So you have the same musicians traveling with you on each show when you're performing live?
Sometimes we have a cast. We treat it more like a production show. It's less like a band and more like a production show. So we have probably 30 plus cast members that have played our show, whether it be one of the string players, the bass player, the guitar player, the drummer, the technician, you know, who mixes the shows and does the setup. We have multiple people at each position. So if somebody gets a tour, like right now, one of our players is out with Shania Twain doing some tour dates. We have another cast member that does the shows. If I have babies, you know, someone else fills in for me and does the show. We have enough people that we could do multiple shows in the same night in different cities. And every cast member brings a slightly different personality and skill set.
Yeah.
So we do enjoy that. But everybody, you know, they're all really good musicians in their own right. A lot of our backing rhythm section is from Blue Man Group Las Vegas.
Oh, right.
So,
Really?
and the string players have all toured with different artists and things like that. So it's you know, we have some people that you're likely to see us every show, like me, and
Yeah.
then there's different people that'll come in and out depending on what's going on. But it's always a great group of people.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, and I
talking
love how
to-
you let them all solo, so they all get to showcase their talents. It's not just, obviously you're up there, but it's nice how they all get to showcase their talents.
Yeah, I didn't want to go up there and have it be like the Nina D show with 7 other people on stage that I'm never going to talk about. You know,
Right.
that what kind of chooch would I be if I did that? So I kind of like to feature everybody. They all get to take solos. They all get to have their moment to shine during the show. I do most of the talking to front the show just because I think I'm probably the nuttiest on a microphone. But in terms of the actual soloing and featuring of musicians, everybody gets their time to shine.
That's great. That's great.
Right on, right on. Okay, so September
So
15th, you will be at
September 14th, yeah.
the Arcada in
Right,
St.
sorry.
Charles, and September 15th at the Des Plaines Theater. Mr. Ron Anesti, keeping music alive in Chicago. It's amazing how many bands that
Yeah, I go to the Arcada a lot, Nina. I'm there all the time. I actually just saw Stephen Piercy there a couple of nights ago. He's keeping music alive, and bands like you are helping it now too, because we're getting to that point where unfortunately all the bands from my era, the 70s and 80s, are either retiring or there's one original members, or we're losing them, unfortunately, like Jack Russell the other day.
Right.
So it's great that bands like yourself, and we've helped discover quite a few, not discover, bring attention to quite a few bands on our show the last couple of years. So, and it's great you're out there doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we
and
all
there-
got to do our part to keep rock alive. That's for sure.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
and there's spaces opening up, and there's more than qualified people. There's more qualified people to step into those spaces and fill them for sure.
Yeah.
Like I
And
was
before we
talking
let you
about-
go, I just wanted to ask quick, are you working on a solo project as well?
Yes, I am. I'm actually working on trying to get an original album out by the end of the year. I have like carefully scheduled time to work on specific cover things that I'll release at the same time that I'm working on that. But like I said, I'm trying to hit certain milestones with my following before I launch any. Like I said, it would be a shame to do all that work for nobody to hear it. So
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I was
Right.
talking to a normie yesterday, and I brought up the thing about how people have multiple bands, East Coast band, West Coast band, and he's like, "What?" Like he had never heard of this. I'm like, "Well, yeah, it makes sense, especially now with the cost and everything and da da da." On one hand, more musicians are working. They're working with multiple artists, but also the music business changed after the plague, and costs went up, and you have to be smart, and you almost have to be extra vigilant on your budgeting and your time and everything else, because I'm sure it's not 100% back yet, but it looks like it's getting there. New venues are opening up.
well, I can tell you that the work is back again. The shows are back again. We're getting paid just about the same price that we were before. The difference is the cost of travel has just about tripled.
Right.
The airline flights for me to get 8
Mhm.
people to someplace like Philadelphia, we're talking almost $10,000 or more sometimes in
Right.
just flights. That's before I pay my band.
Right.
So then if
Mhm.
you have to add hotel rooms and ground transportation into your tour costs, what's happened is my profit margins have gone beep
Oh, yeah.
because the cost of my expenses are high, but the amount of money we're making is the same. So
Right. And on top
they've
of that,
done us
there's
no
per diem,
favors, these
there's per
airlines.
diem and meals
Yeah.
and transportation and everything. I mean, everyone's in your pocket except you.
Yeah, and it really sucks that the airlines have been allowed to kind of run wild and give worse service for way more money. Just whatever they
Yeah, I
want to
don't-
do.
I don't-
But
Yeah, I don't understand that either. It's unbelievable, but thankfully people like you kept us going during the plague when everything was locked down, and all the collab videos and all the special videos that everyone like, that is such, for all the people who couldn't get out of their house, that was such a treat every day to see what musician, what group of musician, or what group of friends is going to come out and say, "Here, hope you have a good day." That's what music's for. And,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and
Yeah, we did a lot of live streaming during COVID. My husband had figured out a way to make a live stream where it was mixed like with the same quality as a live performance. So he wasn't just sticking up a cell phone and doing a show. He was actually, he did the entire Dark Side of the Moon album in its entirety alone, live streaming from our house during COVID. Like next level nuts.
Right.
Yeah. You know, when the pandemic hit, Ron from the Arcada would have concerts on, he'd stream them from the place. Of course, the place was empty. You
Yeah.
get local
Right.
bands just to play, and it was great because you sat in it, you pop your computer up, and you get to see a concert for an hour and a half, even though nobody was there and you were sitting at home, but you had to do what you had to do. So when you get there on the 14th, I'll see you. Make sure you ask Ron for some of his famous meatballs. Have you had
Oh
those
yes,
yet?
we had them last time.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the whole
Well, you
reason
know how good
we
they
want to
are.
go there is Ron's
Right?
meatballs.
Yeah.
So
Yes, we just
they
want to
are
give a
good.
quick shout out to Mr. Rob Armstrong, who provided the photographs today for the podcast with Nina. And Rob's been, telling me about you guys for a long time. So I've been listening to you through him, and I'm glad we finally got you on. Apologies for the snafu that happened early today. So just
It
want to make
happens.
a public apology, but weird.
no worries.
But you're great at what you do, and I'm sure you're just going to continue in your greatness and paying tribute to Eddie Van Halen, my favorite musician of all time. You did him an honor. So
Oh, yeah.
Thank you,
Did him
Nina.
justice, that's for sure.
everyone,
Thank you.
go check out Nina's website, femsofrock.com, and you also still do stuff at bellastrings.com, correct?
Yes, I own and produce the Bella Strings. I write all the arrangements. I don't perform in the group anymore because I'm too busy touring, but we do still perform, and I do all the bookings and everything for the group for corporate and private events.
Right on. So go check that out and make sure Nina's playing in a town near you. Thank you, Nina, very much, and we'll see you guys
Thank
next
you, Nina.
Thanks. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
time.
Bye-bye.